It took 4 years for Elijah McClain's case to get to a jury. After years of questions, protests, and days in court, we'll soon learn if 2 police officers will be held responsible for his death. Denver voters are feeling a little déjà vu over a ballot question, asking them to help fund local preschools. We'll explain why you're still being asked to fork over some tax money, despite Colorado's new universal pre-K program.
She liked giving, sharing, teaching. So I'd like for people to remember that about her.
A pioneer of the movement to desegregate Denver's schools is remembered as a hero, an educator, and a mother. Though she's passed, her family says her legacy lives on. And we're taking a look at the Colorado history that's not always taught in the classroom. It changed our state, so why do you have to go to a museum to learn about it? That's tonight on Next. For months, thousands of protesters marched through the streets asking for justice for Elijah McClain. Justice looks different for everyone. In the court of law, justice in this case is now in the hands of a jury. It's taken 4 years to get here, but for the first time, we will soon have a decision on whether Aurora police officers and paramedics are responsible for Elijah's death. This case centers around 2 of the responding Aurora police officers. A total of 5 officers and paramedics have been indicted in this case. McClain died in 2019 after police stopped him as he was walking home from a convenience store. He was doing nothing wrong and had not committed a crime. They put him in a carotid chokehold before paramedics arrived and injected Elijah with ketamine. Today, during 3 hours of closing arguments, the defense team pointed to testimony from medical experts who said it was the ketamine overdose from paramedics that killed McClain. But prosecutors say officers ignored McClain's repeated insistence that he couldn't breathe while he was being restrained.
All 3 medical experts say it was the ketamine that killed Elijah McClain. You heard from Dr. Bouther, the primary cause of death was ketamine, a 1.8 times dosage, and he said it's more likely than not he would have survived but for the ketamine.
This is not a split-second decision. This was an 18-minute and 2-second event where they had infinite chances to do what they were trained to do, where they had infinite chances to choose to do the right thing that all of you know is the right thing, not even trained as police officers. But instead, let Elijah deteriorate, and his situation gets worse and worse.
Important to note, this case would likely not be at this stage if not for the protests of 2020. The DA had already, at that time, declined to file charges before the Attorney General took another look at it. Third officer in this case is scheduled to go on trial this month. The 2 paramedics are set for a trial in November. Meanwhile, 3 Aurora police officers are under investigation for shooting and killing a 14-year-old after an armed robbery have now returned to full duty and full service following an internal affairs investigation. APD says the investigation exonerated 3 officers following the shooting of Jordell Richardson this summer. Police say Richardson was with a group of teens that robbed a liquor store on June 1st. Officers chased him, tackled him, and one of the officers shot Jordell in the stomach. Investigators said Jordell was reaching for a gun. It took more than a week for police to reveal that it was actually a pellet gun. An internal affairs investigation exonerated the officers of violating the most serious policies like use of deadly force and physical force. One officer did receive a written reprimand for cursing during the incident. Another who followed the other robbery suspects before returning to the scene of the shooting was warned that he was not activating his body camera quick enough. The District Attorney's Office also investigated the officers and declined to file charges last month. Well, Colorado preschoolers are in classrooms right now thanks to your tax dollars. Since August, Colorado has used that tax money to fund universal preschool. Yet come November, Denver voters will see another question asking them to shell out some more tax money to fund preschools. Our Marshall Zellender explains.
The ABCs of preschool are that at least half-day classes are now funded by the state, paid for through a tobacco and nicotine tax increase approved by voters statewide in 2020. Families in Denver, though, have had access to funding for preschool for 2 decades through the Denver Preschool Program.
Or the original universal preschool for Denver.
That is the subject of ballot issue 2P in Denver to extend the existing sales tax that funds the Denver Preschool Program.
The Denver Preschool Program right now is helping 60% of all the 4-year-olds in Denver. That is 4,600 students per year.
Elsa Holguin is the president and CEO of the DPP, which still exists even with UPK, Universal Preschool. UPK pays for at least 15 hours for every 4-year-old in preschool.
From the state, they'll get the 15 hours, and then the additional support will come from us.
Before UPK, the Denver Preschool program helped Denver families afford preschool. Now with UPK, the Denver Preschool program helps Denver families pay for more needs beyond what the state now covers.
The 93% of the families in Denver that participate in the Denver Preschool program are asking us for full or extended daycare.
The sales tax that the city is asking you to keep going indefinitely is 0.15%, which adds 2 pennies to every $10 purchase. It is set to expire at the end of 2026. Here is some quick history on that tax. In 2006, Denver voters approved a 0.12% sales tax for the Denver Preschool program. In 2014, Denver voters increased it to 0.15%. Then in 2016, Denver voters approved extending that 1.5% sales tax through 2026. Now, Denver voters are being asked to extend it with no end date. Now that UPK exists, that means DPP has some budget relief because the state has to cover the first 15 hours. Holguin tells me DPP is working on a pilot program to fund 3-year-olds for preschool. I like to point this out, Mark. Denver sends out its own version of the Blue Book for Denver issues. Right. There's an opportunity to write pro and cons about ballot issues. No one took the time to write any why you should vote no statement in the Blue Book, so I just like to point that out for what it's worth to voters.
Maybe that's why that Blue Book is so small.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's one ballot issue and there's only why you should vote yes.
So while it's show and tell day here at NEC, since Kyle's gone, we can bring whatever we want on set here. You have inspired another question. Denver's Blue Book actually inspired this next question. Richard wants to know why the Blue Book includes several pages that are just intentionally blank. It says, is it costing taxpayers extra money to print those pages? And I'd never seen this before. I guess I don't look that far back in my Blue Book, but yes, there are blank pages back there.
Well, yeah, because in the Denver has to do it in English and Spanish, and it's the division of the English and Spanish part. So keen eye, Richard, once you get to the end of the English section, I know this isn't great television, but there are 5 pages on the English side and 2 on the Spanish side. This page intentionally left blank. I asked Denver Elections Director Todd Davidson about this, and he gave a reasonable yet confusing answer.
We only really had 24 pages of content. We inserted an extra one just to try to bring down the number of blank pages. But it seems not logical, but it's actually cheaper to do it that way than to send it to an outside printer and print it in batches of 12.
Batches of 12.
So 16, because you need 16, 32, 48. 12 and 24 would cost more, apparently. You'd have to outsource that. I mean, I get it. I bought toilet paper and did the math of, like, dividing the square footage by the price, and when you buy bigger, when you buy more, it's more cost effective.
Whenever you get someone like that to say, yeah, it doesn't really make sense, you know you've asked a good question. That's interesting. Thanks, Marshall. School districts around the state are dealing with some tough realities. We've seen a lot close, some consolidate schools. What we haven't seen until now are students protesting, walking out of class and into the superintendent's office saying, we want something different. Tonight, the Poudre School Board will vote on whether to approve a controversial proposal that was made public just last week. The plan to close schools inspired 2 straight days of protests up in Fort Collins. Students at Polaris Expeditionary Learning have staged sit-ins outside the superintendent's office for 2 days in a row now. The proposal would close that school and move other students to 2 existing schools. Superintendent Brian Kinsley says the changes are necessary to combat declining enrollment. He announced upcoming adjustments last month. That's what they called them, upcoming adjustments, but didn't publicly announce which schools would actually be consolidated or closed until last week. Poudre School Board is scheduled to vote on the plan tonight. Superintendent Kinsley says this is just the first round of potential changes and that the district will likely consider more consolidations over the next few years.
And the Keys family, I mean, they were heroes at a time when we needed heroes.
Lila's Keys played a central role in the push to desegregate Denver's classrooms. 50 years later, we thank her. The Chicano community in Colorado is central to Colorado's history, but keeping that history alive hasn't always been easy. And Excel's decision to retire a massive coal plant down in Pueblo isn't sitting well with the plant's co-owners who say they want a buyout plus a couple $1 million. That's next. A massive coal power plant in Pueblo has caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damages and is now slated to close 4 decades early. That's one side of the story. The other side will now be heard in court. Core Electric Cooperative is now suing Excel over alleged mismanagement of the Kamanchi power plant in Pueblo. The co-op blames Excel for ongoing issues with the generator at the plant, including 700 out-of-service days since the plant opened back in 2010. In court documents, Core says those breakdowns, as well as other issues at the plant, have cost them $253 million in damages. Core also takes issue to the decision to retire the plant by 2031, since they expected the plant to run through 2070, just a little early there. Besides the damages they're seeking, Core says that they want to withdraw as the owners of the plant. Excel disputes those claims, of course, so it's headed to court. A jury trial began this last week, is expected to last most of this month. Want to get a check of the weather now, Danielle Grant. Danielle, it feels like summer still, looks like fall, and yet you're telling me that winter is coming?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. This is why Colorado is the best place to live, right? We get pretty much all 4 seasons, sometimes in a day, sometimes in a week, and that's exactly what we're anticipating this week to come. Clouds already starting to shift in across downtown Denver after a day at 80 degrees. Yes, temperatures running easily about 15 degrees above our average here in the city and across the eastern plains, 70s around Kremling to Eagle and about 79 in Grand Junction. There is that next storm system. It's sitting and spinning off the coast of Washington, and wow, is it going to pack a good punch. Already some of that moisture is moving in across the Pacific Northwest. Little light rainfall, some snowfall along the higher peaks, but for now, we're just talking about the cloud cover. Now, overnight into tomorrow morning, we'll wake up to some sunshine here in Denver. Cloudy skies out to the west. As the afternoon rolls in, 3, 4 o'clock, you might find a couple of isolated showers, a rumble of thunder, and then later tomorrow night, that's when this storm system moves in. Heavy snowfall across the higher mountain passes with some rain showers here around the metro area. By 11 p.m., that snowfall across Trail Ridge Road, we're talking Rabbit Ears Pass, it's going to be heavy. That's where we have the winter weather advisories in place. 6 o'clock tomorrow until 6 a.m. on Friday. Easily 4 to 10 inches of snowfall coming through again. Those are going to be areas above about 9,000 feet, but these winds, they are going to pack a really good punch too as that front rolls through. Tomorrow, kind of our last day in the 70s. The warmer weather sticking around for one more day before a big cool off comes our way. 58 for a high. Good chance for rain for us on Thursday. It's going to be windy. We'll be looking at below average temperatures and possibly our first freeze here in Denver early on Saturday morning, but temperatures warm up back to the 60s and 70s next week.
50 years ago, Layla Keys and her family were pivotal players in the fight to desegregate Denver's schools, acting as lead plaintiffs in a Supreme Court decision that opened doors for students of color. Layla's passed away on October 1st, but her legacy lives on in the classroom.
Good memories. Yeah, lots of good memories. And my name is Christy Romero. My mom was Layla Keys. Learned a lot from her. I was blessed to have her. Her and my dad were involved in a desegregation lawsuit, Keys versus Denver Public Schools.
I know. My name is Craig Pena, and I was born and raised here in Denver. And my relationship with the Keys family was, we were one of the Latino families in the Park Hill catchment area. And that's how we ended up being involved in the Keys case.
I can remember, when I was probably about 9 is when our house got bombed because of that.
They paid a heavy price. And the Keys family, I mean, they were heroes at a time when we needed heroes.
So I've learned a lot from that.
They're pioneers. I mean, the Keys desegregation case is a landmark case in the history of education for the United States as a whole. I think she and her family should be remembered as heroes and of our community.
She's not very hard to describe because it was a little bit of everything. She liked giving, sharing, teaching.
I can tell you I benefited personally from an integrated education, but they were our heroes. And so, we just lost one of our heroes.
So I'd like for people to remember that about her.
remember and thank her for everything that they did. Celebration of Life ceremony will be held for Keys on October 19th at a church in Denver.
It's the history of Colorado, but people of color were being excluded from that history and still to this day continue to be excluded.
That history changed the state, yet the fight to make sure everyone knows it continues. Next. There are parts of Colorado history that everyone knows well. Then there are topics that make huge impacts here, yet rarely make it into the textbooks taught in school. The Chicano civil rights movement of the 1960s and 70s changed Colorado, yet the fight continues to make sure everyone knows what happened.
So this is the entrance to the exhibit.
Museums tell stories.
These are major events that happen in Colorado.
Important stories that Lucha Martinez de Luna wishes were also told outside History Colorado.
This is actually history that is very, very rare to learn about in school still.
Lucha helped curate the exhibit on the Chicano civil rights movement. She wants to share the experiences of activists like her mother and father.
I think that's him right there.
The Chicano rights movement started in the 60s when young activists stood up to fight for social justice and equality. At West High School in 1969, students walked out of class demanding a better education. Lucha's father was there.
What they were really protesting was the extreme racism and discrimination in the high school.
You can do something throughout history and nobody knows about it unless you have artifacts, unless you have poetry, unless you have the written word. It goes into oblivion. Dr. Ramon del Castillo is an activist scholar. He lived the history. He later taught at MSU Denver. I saw for myself that they had not been given this part of the history. We met him at Cesar Chavez Park in Denver. I met Cesar Chavez in about 1972 or 73. Where the history of the man who fought for farm workers' rights is on display. People like Chavez and Rodolfo Corti Gonzalez led the charge to fight for Chicano rights. Government didn't meet the needs of the people, that it was going to take the people in organizing to make the world change. Chicano history is Colorado history. From 1848 and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo to the walkouts of the 1960s and all the way to today.
It's not necessarily just their history, it's the history of Colorado. But people of color were being excluded from that history and still to this day continue to be excluded.
Lucha compared the social justice movement of the 1960s as very similar to the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement that we saw a couple years ago. Still, the fight continues not only to educate everyone, but also for fair representation in places like education and government. Your feedback and maybe a little coffee next. Welcome back. Some feedback for you tonight. Actually, a lot of feedback today. Doug says, I think Marshall needs a raise if he is calculating the square footage of toilet paper. Don't disagree with you on that one there. If he's calculating toilet paper, he's also looking at why blue books have pages. I hope the bosses are listening for that raise. And Dennis says, we love Next. Watch it every day. Keep up the great work. Kyle will be back in just a couple of days, but we appreciate you letting us hang out with you today and over these last couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.